The morning hung like a sheet of glass over the pastures. Still, silver mist settling in hollows, the cows barely lifting their heads. I was finishing a cool-down lap when a black SUV rolled up the gravel drive. Big white letters on the door said HOA enforcement. I watched from the fence post the way you watch a dog sniff at something that might be trouble. A man in a cheap uniform climbed out, badge clipped to his chest. HOA Security Division. He swaggered to the porch with a jangling ring of keys and an overripe confidence. He tried one key in my deadbolt, then another. Each refusal made the smirk on his face shrink like a punctured balloon. When he finally looked up, he found me leaning on the fence. "You!" he barked. "This property is within our jurisdiction. You're in violation. I'm here to inspect." I stayed calm. "You're trespassing," I said. "This land's private. Step off or I'll call the sheriff." His face flushed. He drew a handgun from his belt and aimed it straight at me. "You'll do as I say," he snapped. "Open the door." Time narrowed a tunnel. The training I'd buried after the Navy surfaced like a tide. I checked his grip, his stance. Feet too close, chest forward, finger poised on the trigger like a kid with a rented prop. He wasn't police. He was a man in costume with more bravado than skill. "Really?" I asked, raising my palms slow and wide. "You sure you want to do that?" He barked something about authority. I heard the keys rattle. I saw the jitter of his hand. In one fluid motion, I closed the distance. It was clean, precise, the kind of movement you learn by making it a reflex. I twisted his wrist. The pistol clattered. He yelped like he'd been surprised. My other hand drove him into the porch post, pinning him. There was no theatrical violence, only tight, controlled force. The goal was control, as quiet as the fields. "What are you doing?" he stammered, panic leaking through the bravado. "Stopping you from committing a felony for the sake of a parking ticket," I said. I kept my voice low because low works better than loud. Pointing a firearm at someone on their own property is a bad idea. He went still. The mask of certainty slipped. I could hear breath that wasn't steady. I eased off, not because I felt mercy, but because escalation is for fools. Deputies roll faster than you think. Arrests are inconvenient for people who pretend to be enforcers. "Get down on your knees," I said. And he did it like a man who woke up and found himself wearing a costume he was suddenly very ashamed of. I kept him there and called it in calmly, clearly. Dispatch. Possible armed trespasser. Location. Description. I gave them his make, model, and the way the sun hit his badge, making it look brighter than it was. He tried to justify master key, HOA authority, community safety. At some point, words turned to a whine. I let him ramble because nothing disarms a fraud faster than a legal record of his own voice. The deputies arrived exactly as the sun cleared a ridge. 2 cruisers, slow and steady. Trained professionals whose faces said they'd seen county drama before and knew how to pull the strings tight without letting anything snap. They took over quietly, like medics taking over a patient. I handed them the jangling keyring, the badge, the remnants of his swagger. He was detained for unlawful possession of a firearm on private property and impersonating an officer. His master key? Turns out it was a locksmith special his HOA had bought on a discount site. Meant for gates, not houses, and certainly not a license to bust down doors. The badge? Cheap chrome, an online novelty. The swagger? Pure theater. Later, after the deputies had his information and the man was sitting with his shoulders small in a cruiser, I walked the house and noted small things. The lock that had passed his attempts, the camera that had tracked his approach, the motion sensor that pinged my phone as he circled the porch. I rechecked the deadbolt anyway. Good habits matter. Then sat on the steps and drank black coffee while the ranch buzzed back to its normal rhythm. Neighbors came by, murmuring thanks and shaking their heads. Someone asked if I'd called the sheriff immediately. I told them I had called dispatch the moment the gun came out. Someone else asked if I had been scared. The truth is complicated. Fear is a tool, but if you've been trained to turn reflex into response, it's a shorter distance between reaction and control. Later that afternoon, a deputy approached me with a form and an explanation about pressing additional charges. "You handled it," he said. "Not everyone could keep it that calm." Training helps, I said. I didn't say Navy. Not because I was hiding it. I just didn't need the show. The trident tattoo under my sleeve had done enough talking. In the days after, the HOA scrambled through awkward apologies and legal speak. Their security division saw an audit. The man who had pointed a gun on my porch? He was dismissed from his role and looking at a criminal charge that would teach him about consequences much harsher than the ones stamped on his clipboard. The ranch settled. Cows grazed like nothing had happened. The porch was swept. The keys were locked up in a small safe that had one of those old-fashioned keys I kept for show and nothing more. The incident stayed a local story for a week, a cautionary tale about people who assume power because they can buy a uniform and a keyring. When I went back to my run a few mornings later, the mist hugged low again. My pace was steady. The fields were patient and indifferent to human vanity. On the fence post I thought of the man in the uniform, the gun that was never fired, and the absurdity of confidence without competence. I didn't wear medals around the yard. I didn't need to. The ranch, the locks, the camera feeds, and the deputy's report would tell the version of the story that mattered. A man who pretended to be an enforcer met the real thing, and it didn't end well for him. There are easier ways to handle nuisance. But when someone points a gun at you on your own land, courtesy is a poor currency. Training, clarity, and the unblinking willingness to make calm choices under pressure brought the peace back to my fields that morning, and reminded everyone that authority is earned, not manufactured.